health transformation. Good evening, everyone. This is Vidhi Beri, your health transformation coach. Welcome to day 8 of re-engineering your health. We are starting the second phase of this series today with should we and is milk good for you? And I'm doing this with a view to reaching out to families and child health. I work as a child nutrition specialist. I work as a maternity wellness advisor. And the number one topic we have to keep discussing is the consumption of milk. So I wanted today bring your awareness to why this topic is so widely discussed and evidence to both ends of the story, to both ends of the argument exist. What are those ends of the argument? One being milk is absolutely toxic, poisonous and indigestible for human beings. The other being milk is high protein, high calcium and essential for human beings. Now, I think I have a unique perspective here because I work in the maternity sector and I actually began my career as a feeding and a lactation advisor to mothers, which is when I discovered the role of milk, human milk, cow's milk and other sources of milk in the human diet right from when babies are born. So let's demystify that a little bit. The problem exists in our perception and the usage of the word that is so ingrained in us that we are not even able to see it any differently. And I'm going to give you a small example to understand that. Maybe many of you have noticed this. You're familiar with tomatoes, right? What is tomato? Is it a weed? Is it a vegetable? Is it a fruit? What is it? So a lot of you right now will say that it's a fruit. It's not native to India. It comes from Mediterranean regions, was exported, and now we classify it as a fruit because scientists classify fruits in a particular way. So we classify it that way now. And based on that, we have changed the manner in which we think tomatoes are suitable for us. It's also termed as a nightshade presently. But this wasn't so many hundred years ago. So when it started being exported, people actually thought of it as a weed. Then they thought of it as a vegetable, and that had many implications on how it was consumed and how it was taxed, and then it became a fruit. So again, the consumption, the recipes, everything has changed. So you see, the point is that science will go through all of these stages, keep classifying foods in a particular way, and that influences how we see, perceive, talk about and think about food. Fortunately or unfortunately, milk has the same story, and you must understand that for the last thousands of years, the narrative has changed constantly. The narrative we are talking about right now in terms of milk is only about 100-200 years old. And yes, there will be a lot of people there who will question me that in the Indian context, we've had a lot of stories. We have our mythological stories about mythological characters, gods drinking certain kinds of dairy products, drinking milk. But the entire use of imagery from mythology, from characters that we are familiar, using it in classical film, in classical media, is a part of an industry, and that's something you might have to understand because science is there, industry is there, and there are bigger players out there which are marketing and advertising. So when things are etched in our heads, sometimes we're not able to separate ourselves and see it as it is. When I say see it as it is, see it for its nutrient properties and see it why we have evolutionarily gone on a big seesaw when it comes to milk consumption. So milk consumption, very simply, starting from a little baby, is actually purely about food. A baby gets food from their mummy in the form of breast milk. That is food. Let's not call it milk. We call it milk and we confuse the whole issue. A calf gets milk from the mother cow as milk because we humans classify that as milk, but it's actually just food. When a child is 6 months old, a human child, it's ready to start complementary foods, and the complementary foods are in the form of solids that every single culture has discovered. So in India, we tend to start with a small fruit and then we move on to usually moong dal and rice, at least in the northern belt. What do we do, say in some European countries? We actually start with vegetable purees, and the first preferred iron-rich food there is minced lamb, because that is supposed to have the ideal levels of iron for a child 6 months plus. And in India, we are doing dal and rice. So again, this is about science, it's about perception and what is accepted as a part of culture. This is the thing I want to talk to you about today, because we are just thinking of milk as one dimensional. We're thinking of milk as something we have been told to drink, one in the morning, one in the evening. But let's widen our horizons to think of it as food. It is just another source of food, and until 6 months, human milk is the main source of food for a human baby. After that, what should we do? How should we diversify? So here's where the science comes in. In human evolution, we have seen stages, phases, and regions where we find human populations developing an enzyme called lactase, which stays past the usual weaning period in a human being. What do I mean? We have that enzyme to digest the sugars in human milk, and it stays past the natural weaning age in many cultures, where through generations humans start consuming different kinds of animal milk as a survival instinct to survive. It is a food source that's available, we use it, and we use it to survive. You find it in certain regions, and in certain regions you'll find that humans are absolutely not able to digest it. Within those populations, you will have again people with robust digestion who can absolutely digest anything, and then the ones that suffer. So again, it's about survival, it's about evolution. What are we finding now? Because this is a very relevant debate right now, I'm actually finding 1 in 10 babies who react to their mother's milk. Now hear me very carefully. 1 in 10 babies who react to their mother's milk, their mother's own human milk, which is their food, their primary source of food, within the first 3 to 4 months of delivery. And when we investigate what's going on, it's not purely the mother's milk, it's what's in the mother's diet. Now, how do I know the child is reacting? What's going on here? Typically in India, pregnant women are given at least half to 1 liter of cow's milk to drink every single day. And this practice continues, and it is increased in quantity the minute a mother gives birth, because there is a belief, a widespread belief, that the mother should consume more dairy and cow's milk as a primary source for protein and calcium, enough to nourish her baby, who should get that through her body. Now you must understand that a human body is capable of making all of these foods by itself, provided the right balanced nutrition is given to the mother. When we suddenly flood that mother's digestive system with milk that she is not used to, going from 1 glass to 4, what is going to happen? She doesn't have the enzymes to break those sugars. So she is getting the necessary protein, but she cannot digest it correctly, which automatically passes on to the baby in a manner that is indigestible to the baby. And we see reactions in the manner of a huge malfunction of digestion, excessive diarrhea, excessive colic, which is a lot of gassiness and trouble in babies, and many other disturbances which have now been identified by pediatricians. So this is the story with a newborn, where the dairy product is going through the mother excessively into the child, and the child is reaction. And 1 in 10 is a very high number. And how do we know that it's the milk product? Because the minute we stop it, all becomes fine. The child's digestive system restores itself within 2 weeks. Does this extend to everything that's cow's milk dairy? I would venture to say no in my experience, and I say no because I think ghee, cow's milk ghee, can be excluded from this equation, because we have actually kept ghee as a fat in mums' diets and seen that babies have done just okay. So the story starting from a newborn going up to a child, what happens here? Let's say we discover no intolerances in a little baby, and as they grow, by the age of 1 year, which is what is recommended by the WHO for children, start cow's milk dairy. Now here again contentions come up. even in the medical circle. Should we give formula milk to the babies, which is fortified with iron? Should we start with cow's milk dairy? Should we continue to breastfeed the child? I'm giving you this as a background to absolute infancy, toddlers, childhood, and then adulthood. What's going on with the body? What's right for you? Discovering it for yourself and really understanding this issue at large, rather than saying, this is what I've been taught, this is what I've heard, this is what some of the science says, so I make a decision just based on that, rather than being internally aware and externally aware of the evolution of this practice, in addition to the marketing practices that are out there. So, as we go along, we find that a 1-year-old who starts to drink cow's milk as milk. Now, here is where the difference comes. If a baby is drinking milk, any form of breast milk, and then starting food, you're transitioning. That's called the process of weaning. You're starting to eat adult-like food. And when we start eating adult-like food, humans find this very, very disturbing. They almost find that the child needs to be given a comfort to switch from breast milk to human milk. The child actually doesn't understand. You must understand that they have a very different practice and a way of processing this, and we are putting those ideas into a child that, okay, you had this milk, now go on to this other milk. And we might do it by reinforcing, giving a bottle or a glass, any of these gadgets, because we think it's important. We have been indoctrinated, and that's how we grew up. Think of it this way. You are going from feeding to eating. Eating can be a whole lot of variety of foods, and that whole lot of variety of foods can include everything from seeds to nuts to dairies to cereal. And if it can include everything, everything is food. There is no separate milk. You went from mummy's milk, which was food, to regular food, and that has all food groups. Milk as a separate entity is in your head, which you planted in that baby's head, and it absolutely does not need to exist as a separate entity, which you have in the morning and in the evening, or morning and at night. So how would I want you to think about this? Because there is science to say that humans do not have the evolutionary alleles and the natural proteins to digest milk. However, I said that there are human populations that did develop the lactase to break it down and digest it for a certain amount of time. But if we were just feeding our babies till natural weaning age, just like all animals do, this situation wouldn't arise. Is that practical, not practical? That's a question for every single urban and rural culture to decide. In rural India and many other rural African and American nations, we have natural weaning age as 3 to 5 years in humans, which is when you would stop that lactase production in your body and you would be fortified enough to eat regular foods like an adult. In cities, however, we choose not to feed our children more than 1 or 2 years based on different ideas, work, choices made by parents and families and the medical community. I would still step back and say those are personal choices, but think again about those choices, because those are not natural choices. So they are again industry driven. And today my idea is to make you aware of all these choices you are making right from when you were born, made by your family, and then you start making them based on indoctrinations and concepts put in through our families. So at the age of 1 till the age of 5, what is the exploration that should happen? If you as a family choose that I need cow's milk dairy in my child's body, what is the information you need? The number one information you need is to observe what that baby's digestive system is like. And if you can actually observe your own now as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old, as a 90-year-old. I know there are a few 90-year-olds watching this, and I'm very grateful that you are so invested in your health even now. You will actually see through time different impact. And in the last 10 years of my experience, this is what I've seen. I would say I would break it down into 3 groups. There are 30 to 35% who absolutely do beautifully with all kinds of cow's milk product. They have been born and brought up on it. They've never experienced any issues, at least in their memory. They seem to have all the right boxes ticked in terms of calcium, good protein levels, good bones, no issues. Maybe we don't know what's going to happen later, but I can vouch for these people at least till the age of 30 to 50 years. Then we have a group of 30 to 35% people who have mild to major digestive issues, which could be ranging from constipation, diarrhea, acidity, heartburn. Again, it's very, very similar to what we talked about in our gluten session. And you will see a lot of discomfort, a lot of bloating, and mild respiratory issues. So this is the second chunk of people. And then the third, where we have absolute reactions, right from skin allergies to tummy allergies to ulcerative colitis, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and many others. So these are the three groups of babies, children, adults, elderly. I have seen it across the board in my practice, and I've seen all three groups coming. And that's my personal assessment, that this is how I would break down human digestion. So what's the plan ahead? The plan ahead is I want you to actually discover where you fit into the symptom group, and are you actually aware of the symptoms in your body? Because there's a lot of science to back up that this is good for you, this is bad for you, meaning cow's milk, dairy. And now there's actually a classification in this. That classification is A1 and A2 milk. That also exists because we have European cows with A1 milk, which is more high in casein protein, and casein protein is extremely heavy for humans to digest, so seen as bad for you. A2, more native Indian, seen as better for you, lesser of the casein, more lactose, still much heavier in terms of protein content for human consumption. But then again, humans adapt everything. So we've adapted our milk to make ghee, butter, cheese, paneer, chena. We do all of that and have yummy desserts from it, lots of interesting food items. Absolutely don't give up anything. Eat everything and discover what's happening to every single member of your family. This week, your challenge is to observe which category do you fit into. The three categories that I told you about. Highly allergic, mildly allergic, absolutely seems to be fine. See where you fit into these three categories, discover it in your body. I would say that I think half of you are going to fit into that middle category, even though I classify it as 35. We would still say that maybe 50% of you will be in the middle category because we have suppressed the symbols. We've suppressed the signals in our body which tell us that something's not going right. Something is amiss in that digestion, in that respiration. How does the respiratory system actually get affected? Do you know that it does? So there's a lot of acidic reaction that drinking milk causes, whether it's cold milk, warm milk. And that reaction that's been caused in you will form what we call phlegm in the body. And when that happens, there's congestion. And that congestion constantly keeps rising and falling, increasing, decreasing the immunity because there are sugars. And like we talked about sugars decrease the immunity of the human body, more so the children. So watch out for this. In Indian culture, every time a child catches a cold and a cough, we intuitively stop their milk consumption. Sometimes there are practices where we give warm milk with a little bit of turmeric in it as a medicinal purpose. But most people will stop yogurt, will stop milk consumption in a child who has respiratory illness or a respiratory breakout, which, by the way, nowadays is happening every month to every infant and toddler. Just check the statistics at your pediatrician's place or check with your friends, cousins who have little babies. So this is a statistic I want you to see. So your task is to actually discover if you have a family of 4, a family of 6 or 8. Make a journal. One of you, all of you, whoever wants to take the responsibility, make a journal of who it seems to impact. Within 6 days, you will discover what's going on. You will know who those people are who are reactive. And you know what else you're going to learn? You're actually going to learn the predominant elemental states. So we mentioned this in one of the sessions. Predominant elemental states of the body, like I said, air energy, wind energy, fire, water, ether, space. Again, based on the Ayurvedic classifications of what the body type, what the temperament is, you will actually see that with milk consumption of cow's milk dairy and cow's milk dairy products. The safest one I find is cow's milk ghee, that tends to have the least reactions in most people. However, if I want you to change the way you think and actually say that, okay, if you seem to be a person somewhere between the mild to non-reactive group, what should you do? How should you make the decision for your child, for yourself, for your family? I think the decision has to change from thinking about drinking milk to going about incorporating all food groups when it comes to nourishing and fulfilling the needs for protein, for calcium, for B12. Because that's where the big debate begins. How do I get all these three, especially as a vegetarian? You've heard of veganism. I don't support it or non-support it. I will point out that if you want to have a little bit of cheese, you should also have a little bit of coconut. If you want to have a little bit of butter, you can also think about sesame powder cream. So if you want to drink a glass of milk, you can also bite and chew a few almonds. Again, we have the concept of sesame milk, almond milk, rice milk, millet milk, all of that is available. But you know what? Let's get out of this thought process of having a glass of milk. Let's fortify our food. So if I were to switch out those 2 glasses of milk today and you say that, my child is having these 2 glasses, what do I do? What can I do immediately? Because I see symptoms. And a lot of my mommies of 10-year-olds to adults who are 18 to 21 ready to change. Some of you are watching today. So if you want to switch out of this because you feel that your tummy is not doing so well and you feel heavy by the time you want to sleep, what can you do? Because those 2 glasses of milk technically are giving you that 600 mg of calcium, lots of B12, 8 to 10 grams of protein per glass, right? That's the numbers we are at. So if you want to switch out those numbers, what are we going to do? We are going to do the same thing we were doing all of last week. Make a little more effort to have a varied diet every single day. And you know why that will work for you now? You might say that it's so much effort. It was so much easier back in the day where you just stuck to rice and dal for lunch, little bit of green vegetables, 2 glasses of milk, simple dinner, simple breakfast. Purely because you're not simple anymore. You cannot watch the same TV programs. You cannot wait for 9 o'clock every single day and sit through advertising, can you? None of us have the patience. We are restless. We are slaves of all our electronic gadgets. And if we are so restless, we need different flavors in our mind, in front of our eyes. We need entertainment all the time. So why is food going to be different? Food's not going to be different. You don't need to stick to those 2 glasses of milk every single day. You are going to diversify from there. And the manner in which you will do it is maybe keeping half a glass of milk there, maybe having a few pieces of paneer here and there, grating your cheese on your bake once in a while, but also what can you include to fulfill all the needs we talked about. So there are 4 or 5 foods I'm going to tell you that can substitute or actually equally come in as variety in your food. And that's going to be a few things we've talked about already. Number 1, coconut. Coconut milk, grated coconut, and coconut cream or malai from the dab that we drink. Then comes almonds. Almonds, very, very high in calcium, very high in protein. So without thinking, you can absolutely have 10 to 15 in your diet on a daily basis. And usually almonds don't cause nut allergies. Then we come to 2 more unsung heroes, which are sesame seeds, sunflower seeds. Here, I think I would be specific with who the person is based on their constitution on which seed to choose, but both of them very good fats, very high in calcium, and sunflower seeds have great protein also. How can I use it? Sprinkle it on my food. For a child, I would powder it and add it to their purees or their soups. And then for B12 and better calcium absorption, we have the superfood called drumsticks. So drumsticks is a new age superfood which has been talked about by umpteen number of nutritionists, and that absolutely can be included as steamed. You can just have it as a part of your dal, sambar, vegetables. For children, we just take out the inside of the drumstick and add it to their soups and their vegetables in case they don't want to chew it. But I did share on my story a little girl who's 3 years old who was absolutely relishing her steamed drumsticks. So we're very, very happy with children who explore, adults who explore and incorporate all of this in their daily diets. So today was more about making you internally aware rather than saying that this is it and this is how I have to think because I grew up on it and I don't want to reject it until I see allergies. We don't have to accept or reject. We just have to embrace newness, embrace variety, and then see where it takes us while we observe what's really going on without fear. Because the first fear that comes if I say to anyone that milk is not good for you is that, oh God, how am I going to get my D3 and B12? And that's an issue today. But honestly, that's an issue even in milk drinking people. So that has nothing to do with milk. It has a lot to do with how you're absorbing. And actually, a lot of us are malnourished, even though some of us are overweight. So that's another issue for another day, because we don't realize that the food that we are putting isn't enough. And then we go on diets and we try to balance things out. But actually, if your body is fully nourished with the variety that I told you, and all the fats, proteins that we've talked about this whole week, with your gamut of fruits and vegetables and the colors that are available, you are not going to be malnourished or deprived of any of the vitamins, minerals, proteins in the body. Be aware of that. So the key to this discussion actually is variety, not fear, but be observant and aware that when you see digestive symptoms, you see respiratory symptoms, you absolutely have to, for 7 days, follow an elimination diet to see, is this true? We always must test with our body, is this true? And if you find that it is true, that cow's milk dairy is causing some problems, stay off it for 3 weeks, see how you do. If your results and your achievements and your mental wellness is better, it's not something I want you to go back to. If it makes no difference, great, go back to it. If it makes a mild difference, add a little bit to your food. That's how you would make your decision, because I can say this with surety, nobody today can come up to you and say that this is the truth and everything else is false, even when it comes to dairy. So that's why the awareness is important within you. I hope this has demystified a lot about the dairy issue. There's a lot of science that we could have discussed, but I wanted to offer solutions today. So your number one task is for that week, become aware of what's going on in your family. And number two, make your diet varied to fulfill the needs of B12, D3, protein, calcium with the foods that I mentioned, and let's see how you do. Share in your recipes for how you manage to do these things. And what we are going to move on to tomorrow is going to be very interesting question in everyone's head. When we have kids and families, especially younger ones and older ones, what do we do about their cravings for junk, sweets, fried food? I think it's the moms and dads, the middle generations in all the families who are fighting the battle with the grandparents and the children. And they are tending to, let me try and make some healthy food for everyone, but don't know what to do because these guys want to eat what they've eaten for the last 50 years. And these guys want to feed off from here and eat what they're eating. And everyone seems to think that, we grew up like this and we are absolutely fine. So I don't understand what all of this new science is about. So tomorrow is going to be a lot about conflict resolution in food, family foods, how much junk should I eat, and really doing the math. Really doing the math for how to get the right amount of nutrition in your body. Make sure you like the fomonomore page, put on your alerts and start following the page. Share the story today because this is a very, very pertinent discussion that we all need to have had, and we are going to continue. I'm going to see you tomorrow to discuss the maths of the junk food in your diet. Hope you all have a great night. See you tomorrow.